Hi! I'm Barb.
And I'm Alex.
And we're Enchanterium. In today's video, we're celebrating my birthday! And to do so, we're making a doll inspired by our childhood favorite strawberry cake with jello. We hid some candles in the design of this doll, so make sure you count them up before the end of the video when we reveal how old I am today.
Ashlenella's skin tone reminds me of a sponge cake, so we're going to use her as a base. We have two of them, and one has a body in better condition, and the other one has a clean face, so we're going to use them both. At least that's what I thought, until I did some bad damage on the neck and chin of the better head while removing the hair. I guess the stain Ashlen wins after all. I tried to remove the stain with pure acetone, and it did help. I managed to clean her nose and some of the lighter marks on the cheek, but it's still visible. We will have to cover it with something else, but I'll take care of it later in the process. This time I was super careful and used a different tool to remove the hair, so there's no damage to the neck. I sprayed the head with Mr. Super Clear 2 times before applying the first layer of watercolor pencils. I'll always do that to have a good grip while sketching and to prevent the vinyl from staining, so if I have to remove the face up again, I'll have a clean canvas. I have to admit I didn't really have a specific idea for her face. Sometimes it's just good to have a clean canvas to paint and see where the process will take you. So I did exactly that. I finally went to an art supplies shop to grab a new black pencil because my previous ones became super tiny and uncomfortable to work with. So, using my brand new black watercolor pencil, I'm defining the eyes, darkening the eyebrows, and sketching the lashes. Ashlen has a beautifully sculpted face, especially the lips that I'm going to enhance even more. She might be my favorite ever after high sculpt from now on. Let's switch to acrylic paints and define the lashes. When I make a mistake, I wet the surface and scratch the paint with an X-Acto knife, and it usually comes off pretty easily. To add a bit of color to her lids, I'm using chalk pastels, a cotton bud, and this funny little pink thing that you guys keep asking about. The packaging says disposable micro applicator, and I think it's for making lash extensions, but for me it works as a tiny pastel brush. I always talk about how much I love black and brown eyes, and somehow I almost never do them on dolls. I don't know why, but light and colorful irises are more in my style when it comes to dolls. Here I had dark red eyes in mind, but for some reason it didn't work with this face, so I'm highlighting the irises. I promise I'll try to make dark irises next time. I like adding a lot of white details to the face, like individual hair on brows, white lashes, a waterline next to the edge of the eyes, catch lights, and tiny dots in the inner corners. Ever After High dolls have big, round, and flat faces, so I'm adding a warm brown tone to the eye crevice, corners of the mouth, and side of the nose, to create an illusion of depth and third dimension. After highlighting the pupils and a sprinkle of Pearl powder, I can start thinking how to cover the stain. My first try was a big strawberry and a lot of small red hearts, but it somehow looked even worse. I decided to put a number of Barb's birthday on the cheek and white floral thingies around the eye. I'm not going to show you the design yet, so you can still count the candles on the doll. In the meantime, let's hear it from today's sponsor, Skillshare.
Skillshare can help you make 2022 a year of new learning, growth, and connection through creativity. My goal for this year is to stay a bit more organized in my sewing studio, aka my room that I live in, and I've been wanting to organize my sewing patterns so that I can see right away what I have available to build on in my doll's outfits. Even though I know how to use Illustrator to make these drawings, I really enjoyed the Adobe Illustrator CC Essentials Training course by Daniel Scott that I found on Skillshare to improve my understanding of the program, which made drawing 35 of these cover pages a breeze. If you too have a specific skill you're trying to learn, Skillshare is the perfect place to start. From graphic design, photography, to freelancing, and more, you can find classes that will match your goals and interests. If that sounds good to you, become one of 1,000 people who can get a free 1-month membership on Skillshare by clicking our link in the video description. Thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and let's move on to making the clothes for our girl. All of the patterns I used for this one are from the Princess Pack from Requiem Art Designs. I'm starting with the beige cotton, which I have interfaced to make a bodice corset thingy to represent the sponge cake in our design. I traced the pattern and the darts and cut it out. The darts are usually the first thing to do. Since this is sleeveless, I attached the backs to the front and then went on to hem it. I used some glue at first to hold down the seam allowance and clamped it down with wonder clips to make sure the fabric is in contact with itself while the glue dries. After removing the clips, I stitched along the edges. I checked the fit and it was sticking out a bit too much for my taste, so I added a simple gathering in the front to make sure it hugs the chest of the doll a bit more. I hemmed the back edges and added a bead and loop closure, but I changed it for a Velcro later on because it didn't really work. The next piece I'm going to work on is a bolero jacket. I'm using a very thin white cotton for this, so I interfaced the bodice part and the cuffs to give them more, well, body. I left the sleeves as is to allow for gathering. I'm doing the same sleeve style as on our Princess Atlantis doll, since the puffs kinda remind me of piped whipped cream. I added all of the gathering stitches to the sleeves and started from the cuff. Then I gathered the middle stitches to round the same length as the cuff. Lastly, I gathered the top edge and eased the sleeve into the curve in the bodice. I sewn down the sleeves and side seams and turned the whole thing over. I was being very delicate with the sleeve since the fabric was so thin and the cuffs so tight. The last part is to hem all around the neckline and back edge, and I did that by hand using my new thimble that I made. For the skirt, I wanted to test out a new iron-on thingy that I bought some time ago. Alex made this strawberry and birthday themed design for one of the tiers of the skirt, and I printed it out on this special iron-on paper, or vinyl. The instructions said to iron it on a hard surface and not an ironing board to be able to apply the appropriate amount of pressure. So I laid out some gingham on a wooden stool and ironed it so there's no wrinkles. I used the same white fabric for the skirt piece as for the bolero, and I ironed the design thoroughly. After it cooled, I peeled the paper and it was ready to turn into a skirt. I added a lace trim at the bottom of the panel, and I did the same with the slightly longer panel of the gingham you just saw. I layered them one on top of the other and ran a gathering stitch along the top edge. I cut out a waistband out of bias tape and started tugging on the thread to gather the skirt, and this is where I should have stopped myself. The iron-on thing was making the fabric super stiff and bulky when I gathered it. I tried making the border thinner, but it didn't look good with the white fabric either, and I tried cutting it on the Cricut to remove the excess background, but it also didn't work, since the vinyl doesn't have glue and is pressed inside down to kind of lock it. So I decided to make the design smaller altogether, so that the length of it is twice the length of the waistband and not 3 times like the gingham layer. It worked a lot better, and you can more clearly see the design. I closed up the back, added Velcro, and our little outfit is ready. The cake this doll is inspired by has jello in it. As kids, we used to call this cake an alien cake because it jiggled, I guess. I'm not really sure looking back at it. So to make the jello element really look like jello, I 3D printed these pigtails originally from a Miku figurine, which I found on Thingiverse. I printed them in translucent red resin, but I had to do it in parts since they needed to be big. Before I connected the parts, I sanded them down a bit to make sure the resin had something to grab onto. I used the same resin I used for printing, stuck the parts together, and held them under my nail lamp. I had to elevate the lamp to be able to do the other part. Then I sanded down the transition between the pieces and some other rough parts. It was going very slow, so I used my nail drill, but with a bit that I don't use for my actual nails. To somewhat hide the dents I just made with the drill and give the pigtails a bit more of a jello appearance, I poured the same printing resin over the prints and let them drip down for a couple hours to get an even coat. I cured that resin in the wash and cure station again, and
this is how the pigtails look after another round in the curing machine. I'll take care of them in a minute, but first let's build the rest of the hairstyle. I'm starting from preparing the surface and covering all the little holes with epoxy sculpt. Then I'm placing long snakes of epoxy starting from the middle and then doing the sides. I use both wide and thin strands to have an interesting structure and some variety. To sculpt the crevices, I'm using a brush and an X-Acto knife. Just make sure to clean them from time to time so the epoxy won't dry and ruin them. I'm going for a stylized anime aesthetic, so no loose hair or complicated texture. The pigtails have to be attached in some way, and I chose to use pins. I'm just worried that the glue won't do the job this time, because these tails are pretty heavy. I'm drilling holes, both in the resin part and the head, and the pins do the rest. These parts don't look great, in my opinion, so to fix that, I'm going to sculpt individual strands made from epoxy. I spent a whole afternoon painting these tails. I want them to look like they're made out of jello, but only from the bottom. First, I painted the top part using a regular brush, and then I tried to make a gradient with an airbrush, and that took hours. It was a long process because the resin was very glossy and paint didn't want to stick, but also because I wanted it to look good when put under the light, and when something is translucent and you paint it with a brush, you can see all the brush strokes, so it needed a lot of coats of paint for good coverage. For her shoes, I chose these Dracula's shoes and gave them a painting treatment. The corset is cute, but I would prefer a bit more saturation in this area of the design. So to make that happen, I used an airbrush again. Gradients are in fashion again, right? We always try to give our dolls at least one accessory, and this time it's a heart-shaped strawberry purse. Strawberry purse. I'm going to transform this bag I found in our stash full of random doll accessories and shoes, and I'm priming it with gesso. After it dries, I can add the right colors and details. So cute! The last accessory is going to be made from real birthday candles, and it's a crown. I tried to make it from wire, then from craft foam, but the candles won't stick to anything. I have to use my favorite material again, epoxy sculpt. I'm putting a blob of clay on the head and poke the holders into the clay. At first I thought it's going to be too big this way. But you know, screw it, she's a princess and she deserves the biggest of crowns. I painted it and added a ring from craft foam to cover the ugly parts. It can be attached with a pin. That means we have another hole in her head, but whatever.
Whatever.
As a last detail, I'm adding these strawberries I made from silk clay. Fruits are great toppings on real cakes, so they should work here as well. And with these few details, the doll is ready.
This is how she turned out. We decided to name her Bonnie for no other reason than that name starts with a B, like Barb, and birthday. If you counted the candles correctly or saw her face, you would know that it's my 25th birthday today. Yay! For my birthday this year, I got older. At this age, you don't really get gifts. Except for we actually just received our silver play button, so I guess I'll count that towards that. Anyway, I'm really happy with how the doll turned out. She embodies the alien cake very accurately.
What is your favorite birthday cake flavor? Let us know in the comments down below. Mine is none, because I hate birthday cakes.
You hate publicly, but you eat privately.
Yes, because I'm a hipster.
Do you mean hypocrite?
Hypocrite, też. Yes, too.
Też. Make sure to follow us on Instagram for some sneak peeks and subscribe for future videos. Have an enchanted day, happy birthday to me, and we'll see you next time. Bye! I closed up the back, added Velcro. Velcro is my enemy!